It's a real pleasure to be here. As you guys know, I'm sure everybody is aware that Instinet has been a leader in financial technology for the last 50 years. And it's really always interesting to follow their developments. My background, I'm actually electrical engineer by training. And after electrical engineering, I did financial engineering. I studied in 2 PhD programs. I did operations research and then finance. And I did the full circle in financial services. I started as a software engineer. I was a system architect working on large scale globalization projects. And also I did risk management before ultimately moving into research and trading. And now I'm doing a lot of big data and AI all applied to finance and investing. So for me, this is also extremely interesting because to do big data and finance, which are very topical things, you do need advanced technology. And it's very, very interesting, I think, what Instinet is doing. And so I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much. And I let other participants introduce themselves.
My name is Minor Huffman, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Instinet. If you don't already know us, we're a global agency-only institutional broker-dealer. We're known as the original Fintech because Instinet basically invented electronic trading way back in 1969. And we provide innovative services and technology for our customers to execute trades across global equity markets. And since Instinet's been founded, we've leveraged technology to improve trading performance and reduce trading costs for our customers. I had the pleasure of joining the company last year and got to attend the 50th anniversary and got to meet some of the original founders of the company. So it was really an exciting time to be at Instinet. My background is software engineering, and I started my career in fintech as a software development intern. I have a bachelor's degree in computer science from MIT and an MBA from NYU Stern.
I'm really honored to be on a panel with such distinguished people such as Irene Miner and the other Peter. My name is Peter Millbrook. I'm the current head of cloud and DevOps solutions at RiskFocus. I've been at RiskFocus for about 5 years and joined the company to help found the group. Prior to RiskFocus, my career goes back about 30 years, the last 17 or so in systems engineering, infrastructure engineering, and building automation. So I've been doing cloud work for the past 15, 16 years or so. My first experience in AWS was about 2006, 2007. I also have an academic background and did an undergraduate in math and a PhD in geology. Just a word about who RiskFocus is. We are a 16-year-old company. We tend to do two things. We do application development, so that we do development in some of the more complex problems in financial services. We do trade systems, risk systems, regulatory reporting systems. We also do infrastructure systems, and for us, cloud means AWS, so we help firms move to AWS. That includes early stages, planning, strategy, mid stages, enablement, things like building landing zones, and then moving some of the harder applications into AWS. So it's a real pleasure to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Hi, I'm Peter Williams. I lead financial services partner solution architecture at AWS, and I've spent my career in financial services. Joined Amazon about 4 years ago, and it's been incredible to see how much the industry has been leaning into cloud. And really, the exciting aspect, for me, has been to see the agility that companies, everybody from banks to insurance companies, hedge funds, asset managers, are seeing as they use the cloud. It's certainly come a long way in 4 years in terms of cloud adoption. The thing that I get excited about, having spent a long career within capital markets primarily, I used to work with electronic trading at a major bank, and there a lot of my team's time was spent focused on the plumbing of what we had to do in order to support the trading area of our firm. We probably spent 80% of our time making sure that the application was resilient, that it was secure, that the databases were replicating, that it would stand a failover, that it was a highly, thoroughly vetted application, highly robust, and maybe 20% of our time on building algorithms for traders. And today we're starting to see organizations really flip that, and it's so exciting to see as they're able to take advantage of cloud services to do things that are really undifferentiated. So they can focus their time. Hopefully, it's an 80% working on trading algorithms, 20% working on plumbing because of their use of cloud services. So it's really exciting to see that transformation and to see the great work that's happening at Instinet and through the help of RiskFocus. So excited to be here and appreciate the opportunity.
So this is the first out of the 3 installments that we're going to do on this topic, which I think barely enough to cover the richness of materials that we have at hand here. But today we're going to talk about the actual complexity of building a cloud. As you may suspect, and you probably have first-hand experience in this, I certainly have tried, I confess, AWS, and it's a huge undertaking. So what we're going to focus today on really on what do you do, like what is the strategy and how do you manage all these aspects around it. And of course, RiskFocus has been integral in this experience, and we have expert Peter Millbrook on hand here. So we're going to start with Miner and ask him what led you to develop this idea and the implementation.
I'll start with a few observations. The market conditions are such that we're seeing rapidly increasing data rates. Customers are trading in smaller size blocks. That leads to more trades. We're seeing an emergence of new venues coming online. So we had 3 new venues launched over the last quarter in the US. And we had a significant event in March. We saw global markets surpassing prior daily message traffic volumes by a factor of 2. We look back, last time we had the big peak was in 2016. So we hit these unprecedented transaction volumes that came across our global markets. You're also seeing the continued decline in commission rates. I think when Instinet started trading equities 50 years ago, stock commission rates were 5%. Now they're fractions. And many retail brokers offer 0 commissions. And then the third thing is, and we're starting to see this more and more, is customers are being a little bit more focused on sustainability in their investment decisions. This is also kind of important for Instinet as a company. It's important for our employees. So these are some of the macro trends that we saw. I think from a business need standpoint, as the data rates have increased, our customers, our regulators still have the same timeliness requirements. So more data, but they need it at the same time. So it's important from meeting our obligations. Second is now we're seeing an increase in the use of that data. So no longer is it reporting P&L, reporting transactions to the regulators. In addition, we see much more of a use around artificial intelligence and machine learning, backtesting algorithms, verification, and all of these other things. So the usage of the data is starting to increase. And then the other thing from our standpoint is agility. How quickly can we get up and running and test and experiment with various technologies to see if they can solve problems for us. And everything else, we need to be cost effective. And then I think when I look at it from a technical standpoint, it's table stakes for us. Our systems have to be reliable, they have to be secure, so we need to ensure the confidentiality, integrity, and the availability of our customers' data, and they have to perform. They have to be fast, so we have to deal with latency, but we also have to deal with volume, so we have to deal with throughput.
So you chose AWS for this purpose. Can you talk more, I guess, Peter Millbrook, because you're the expert. How does AWS really fit all of these needs that Miner has just described?
Sure. I think Miner called out a bunch of things that are really important. I'm also thinking about what Peter said in his introduction, that it used to be the case that I think the number was 80% of services, 80% of his time was spent on underlying service, 20% actually providing value to the customers. And that's just a wrong ratio. So I've been in AWS, as I said, working moving companies there since about 2008. And at that time, AWS was the cloud. Now there are a few others, but two things are just overwhelming. And the reason why we focus on AWS. The first is the breadth of services. So when you're going to put your time into technology, it's at least my company's philosophy that you probably want to spend time on doing that which provides a business value and that which is core competency. And perhaps something like doing backups on databases isn't core competency. So AWS offers more services than the other clouds, and that's one of the reasons we really like it. The other things that we hear from our customers are stability. Now, Miner mentioned reliability, and that's important that the services stay up. Also really important is that the interface to those services, the API is stable as well. And we've noticed problems where if we deliver something to a customer, we want it to be working when we deliver it, so services stay up, but we also want it working a year later so that the APIs are stable, they haven't changed, they haven't broken our code. And for us at least, we find that, and our customers seem to benefit most from using AWS in these situations.
And Peter Williams, I'm sure you can speak at length about these issues. So is this why financial services firms really choose AWS in your experience?
Yes, I think so. And when people think about cloud and why they want to use the cloud, a lot of times they start off thinking about the ability to get compute horsepower immediately, or even storage that's virtually unlimited, and a sort of pay-as-you-go structure of how you can use cloud. But what invariably becomes the primary driver that we see is really about agility and that ability to no longer be bottlenecked, not just in your technical initiatives, but in many cases in the way your organization has to kind of pipeline innovation. When you can create a whole new environment to do a test of some idea that somebody has, and if it doesn't pan out as a lot of kind of thoughts or ideas that are tried, don't, it barely costs you anything because you only paid for that short period of time that you're using it. But more than the cost is really that you didn't hold up other initiatives. And that's what I think we see so often is in a traditional kind of non-cloud traditional data center environment, no matter how many environments you have, you're bottlenecked on innovation. You've maxed out all of them. And if you have a new idea and you want to try something, you've got to really prove why that's a high priority. And then you've got to get confident about testing an idea that you don't necessarily know is going to work. And that's hard to do. When you can create create and test ideas, your organization starts to think differently around innovation and serving your customers better and faster. There's a lot of reasons that people use the cloud, but I think that is the one that is perhaps sometimes most surprising to customers as they start using it, and becomes in many cases a mechanism for transforming the way they serve their customers.
So let's say I'm sold. I want to try this AWS, and I'm a financial institution. And just where do I start? Like, how do I go about planning? What are the key performance metrics? Or Miner, can you share with us what you did? What was your experience with that?
Sure. So I think first is understanding what are reasonable use cases for leveraging the cloud. Oftentimes, problems that can be built and effectively parallelized are very good candidates for the cloud. Things where throughput becomes quite important. We wouldn't go after something that's super latency sensitive. We have many customers who are, they're not measuring latency in seconds or milliseconds, they're in microseconds. So that's where we have proximity hosting. So for things that we can scale out, and then the ability to experiment. So looking for things where we're not quite sure, how do we, can we try some different things out? Getting to things that don't work very quickly so that we can focus our attention on things that do work. So those are some of the examples, that we've had. We do want to get there's a certain amount of security that's required to do anything. So making sure you have like a nice secure landing zone, and you've thought about your account structure and your finance, because those are important aspects to being able to quickly experiment. At my prior company, we were looking at it was a very interesting example. We were looking at a database. We tried various iterations of databases. We tried different database architectures with different database products, and we were able to spin up and experiment in a couple of weeks and determine what the right pattern was. And similar at Instinet, we were looking at a data platform around our transactions and our market data system. We were able to spin up very quickly and look at a couple of different architectures to see which one worked the best for us.
And Peter Millbrook, what are the best practices for this kind of sort of thing? I'm sure you have a whole template since you've been doing this for so long.
Sure. Everyone's cloud journey is unique, right? Because every organization is coming from a unique place, but the pattern is not rocket science. The pattern is very clear. And what Miner was talking about is a great example of following that pattern. So an organization's journey to the cloud, you have to realize it's more than just a technical transformation. It involves other stakeholders in the firm. And so getting those stakeholders together to realize that what they're doing today is not what they're going to do tomorrow, or they'll have to evolve what they do to fully take advantage of some of the things that Peter was talking about. Planning gets you going, but you also need, when you're going to the cloud, strong technical underpinnings. So Miner mentioned a landing zone, and this is a technical development that provides security guardrails about using the cloud safely, reliably, with high security. It's not a new pattern, but it's best practice. So after gathering stakeholders together, you create these technical underpinnings, the landing zone. The next phase is to pick something in the organization that can represent a pathfinder as migration to the cloud. And it was common to say, oh, pick something unimportant because there's low risk there, but that's actually a mistake. Picking something that is important forces focus on it. So pick something that if you fail, it'll hurt. That way, when there are problems, and there will be problems, there are always problems with the first migration. There's something that focuses people together to get together, solve the problems, and make what is ad hoc regular. Because what you're essentially doing is creating a set of processes that the organization adopts to use the cloud better. A lot of firms find that it's very hard to self-grow this. They'll reach out to a partner, and that's essentially what we do. But ultimately, this has to become core competency. So whatever the firm does, no matter if they're getting help from someone like Risk Focus, the final stage is internalization and a return to steady state, where you adopt a culture of innovation. And within that innovation, you've reached a steady state path that continues to move stuff, continues to use functionality, and is core competency to the firm.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. So somebody asked in the chat, what are the trends in fintech? And Peter Williams, if you can address, like, how is your product really adept at anticipating these trends? And like, if we invest in it now, if there's a new machine learning that is called something else coming on tomorrow, how will you be able to handle it?
It's interesting because if you were to talk to almost any CEO in financial services, their focus, their perspective on cloud is almost always the focus on data analysis, using their own data better, and being able to apply machine learning and AI against that data, and to be able to continue to innovate. And so I think the key area that we do see is that organizations in financial services want to pivot to be able to one, store an unlimited amount of information, because they don't know what they have, whether it will be valuable or not in the future. Two, be able to innovate and upgrade and add new capabilities and new machine learning approaches as innovation happens, so that they can find better direction from their own data. It's a huge focus And one of the things that, I mean, to specifically, Irene, to your kind of question, I think an example of where we are looking to help, and I think we hopefully are helping financial services organizations, is as newer servers are coming out, it's very easy to use the latest and greatest capabilities to run your processes faster. There's no longer a need, as in many data centers, to buy servers and wait for them to be delivered and install them and hope that they don't become antiquated before you've paid for them. In the cloud, you can switch hardware through an API. Not only that, services like Amazon SageMaker enable companies to focus their efforts on using their data and analyzing their data. For example, by installing all of the machine learning libraries that a company might need, giving them the option to add new ones. But for the most part, companies are using libraries like MXNet or TensorFlow to run AI capabilities, and they don't want to have to configure and install and manage, nor scale up and down a server farm to run or train their models. All of that is really the undifferentiated aspect of machine learning. They want to focus on looking at their data, looking at the patterns that are identified using these capabilities. And so SageMaker comes with, I think, over 30 open source models for machine learning sort of out of the box, and you can create your own and build more and add in whatever you want. So we do everything we can at AWS to kind of stay current with the latest models available, the latest libraries, and making all of the plumbing and underpinning these analyses available to our customers, so they can spend their time focused on what patterns can I identify, how can I provide a better credit assessment of my customers, and how can I bring data together across my banking customers, my wealth management customers, my credit card customers, that in many cases are the same customer, and I don't necessarily know it, or maybe I have figured out how to link those things, but I don't know how to assess patterns of behavior that across these different systems that I have and data sets that I have that help me serve them better. So that's a big focus we see is around machine learning and data analysis, and really trying to stay at the leading edge for our customers.
So Minor, from your perspective, since you're more dealing with financial regulators, how does AWS support your first machine learning and artificial intelligence needs, but also in the context of financial regulations that are required, including transparency and all this new stuff that came on board in the last 5 years and probably is coming down the pipeline, right? So what do you see applied to these issues?
So, I think many of our regulators have themselves, embraced some of the cloud technologies to, address their needs. I would say is if I have a lot of trades and my volume is up, well, that means the street's up, and that means the regulator is getting larger numbers of transactions. So I think from a processing standpoint, the ability to, scale rapidly up and rapidly down. In the data center, as good as we are and as fast as we are, we can only rack servers so frequently. So in a traditional model, I have to have capacity for whatever my highest watermark was. And I think, as I indicated before, well, everybody just blew through their high watermarks by a factor of 2. So how do we handle that? Making sure that I am there when the next increase in volume happens, so that I can meet my obligations and Instinet can meet their obligations to the regulator. So we're delivering on time. And that's no matter how many trades I have, my CAT reports due at the same time, my OS reports are due at the same time, my transaction reports are due to FINRA, to FCA, and to BaFin. They're all due at the same time. So I have to be able to scale up and scale down. And I think that's one of the biggest advantages that I see in public cloud environments, and many of our target applications into AWS are going to be those that feed up to our regulators. I would say is when you're experimenting, you don't know what you're looking for often. So there's this, we want to capture everything, and then we want to narrow those things down. So again, how quickly we can scale up to handle like wide ranges of data, so that as our quantitative research team, our data scientists look into that data, they can figure out exactly what they want to do to help them develop models, train models, and then really provide the inputs to the algorithms that are going to help our customers execute better. And that's kind of how we see using artificial intelligence and machine learning.
So, and there's another question from Neil Peterson, and the question is an excellent question as well. And I actually spent some time in security, believe it or not, too. so I'm very interested in this as well. So how does AWS help secure data? I mean, we read every day that there is one bank broken into or another, or something else happening. What do you do? And I guess this is for Peter Williams. What is that AWS does to actually help customers have a peace of mind and sleep well at night, frankly?
Yeah, great question. And it's interesting because a few years ago, when I first joined Amazon, one of the questions that we were getting quite often at the time, and the big focus among the biggest banks was, how can I address my security requirements in the cloud? How can I address my compliance requirements in the cloud? And the idea at that time that you could be as secure in the cloud as you could in your own data center just didn't seem right to people, right? The idea that, it felt much more comfortable to have your own data center that you owned that was managed by folks within your company. And it sort of, on the face of it, seemed logical. And what we saw, over the course of, perhaps a few years leading up through 2017, was that the biggest banks really started to understand. And by the way, historically, hedge funds were first to use cloud, followed by asset managers, and then I think insurance companies, especially around kind of burst compute. But by the time the biggest banks really got comfortable, it was because they started to understand that their security requirements could be not just met, but in fact improved through the automation of the cloud. Because when you can configure and monitor and automate any change in your infrastructure through an API, all of a sudden it means you've got much greater controls over your environment, and you're much less subject to a step that was missed during a manual process, because you've got a systematic way of creating your networks, creating your subnets, setting your firewall controls, spinning up servers, and controlling your environment in every way via an automation. And so security professionals realized that not only was that true, but then using services, and Amazon has services like AWS Security Hub, where you can actually automate the controls across your estate of cloud accounts and be able to monitor what's happening and whether you're out of compliance with a particular policy that you've established. All of a sudden, they realize that these wonderful services that are doing kind of the undifferentiated pieces are a tremendous help in terms of your security posture. And what was interesting beyond that, it was, subsequent to the security analysis that every firm was doing at the time, was the compliance analysis. And the same transformation was happening there, where compliance professionals were saying, the idea that I could control my environment in the cloud seems like anathema. And then they looked at the logging and the extensive audit trail that they could provide to their regulators to prove that in fact they were complying with the policies that they had agreed to, gave them the comfort that they could just sleep much better at night. And so it was an interesting transformation, and since that time we've worked hard to create additional services, in some cases, some things really at the request of kind of the guidance we were getting from customers. Services like our KMS service, key management service. Customers in financial services said, we love it, we like everything locked down and secure, but we want to import our own keys. We can create our keys where we want to, import them to the cloud, and we feel better protected that way. So we actually innovated at, and this has happened over and over again at the request of the biggest banks. So, there are so many capabilities that our financial services customers have enjoyed on the cloud, and have helped to push the envelope for us as to how we can help them achieve their security goals as well as their compliance goals. So it's something that we're, security is job zero at Amazon, and we are continuing to prioritize and focus on how we can make that better for our financial services customers.
So that's very interesting, but I'm sure there are some changes required to the processes, right? Peter Millbrook, what do you think? It's what is your opinion on that?
I totally agree. I mean, just ripping a little bit off of what Peter said. Remember the bad old days when there was when security was a curtain wall around the data center, and all you could do if you didn't air gap the data center was provide security to that one firewall or that series of firewalls. But as Peter said, none of it was automated. So the amount of complexity to make a change overwhelmed the volume of that change and added a huge burden in order to make any change. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago, I worked with a firm that was moving away from a model where they had a central firewall team. Everyone who's ever had to deal with firewall rules hates firewall rules because this poor team, they were overwhelmed with the rate of change. They had a 2-week backlog. And because they had so much work to do, the first couple of times they'd get the rule wrong. It was just too much complexity for manual processes. So automatically, any release you wanted to make for an application would take 6 weeks. That was the minimum time to get the firewall rules in place and right, which meant something like a 5-day QA process. Who cares? It's a six-week project. But when a firewall rule is controlled by a security group that instantaneously and risk-free changes and can be rolled back instantaneously, that 5-day QA cycle starts to look pretty bad. It becomes dominant in your development, where it was hidden before by a tremendous inefficiency. Not only in security, well, security gives you one thing in the cloud. You can start looking at compliance as code. So instead of getting a spreadsheet with you, thou must do these 5 things in the abstract, you can actually write a document that says all S3 buckets must be encrypted, and you can enforce that. And you can't create an S3 bucket that isn't encrypted. So immediately you've defined all data at rest must be encrypted. You can say all interfaces must be encrypted. So data at rest, data in flight. And it's automatic, it's easy to defend, and it's everywhere. In terms of processes, there's probably 2 things that we see that really help an organization. The first is small incremental changes. So how do you make changes without introducing a bunch of risk? You make small changes, you're still at the linear part of the chaotic system. The second thing, beyond the small incremental changes, is probably eliminating bottlenecks. Instead of having central organizations that make decisions, have those central organizations do something like put up guardrails. And let me explain just a sec what that means. At the same organization that was pivoting away from this, they had a change management committee, and all changes went through the change management committee, which meant that everyone on the committee had to know everything, which they didn't. So there'd be problems and things would have to be rolled back. And so the committee would go, we're changing things too fast. We got to slow down. So you got a central bottleneck committee that is slowing things down. Whereas in the cloud, you put up guardrails, and the central committee is in charge of making decisions globally. And then that gives developers, DevOps, operations the freedom to operate within those guardrails that are completely enforced. So in terms of process, it's really those 2 things.
that's a great also intro to the next thing that we'd like to talk about. So, Minor, besides like going super fast and avoiding all these delays and lags, etc., did you have any other unexpected benefits? And also about the team management that Peter just touched upon. How did you convince the organization to actually go to the cloud? I mean, Instinet, of course, is technology focused, so it's less than less inertia than in other organizations. But still, I'm sure that every organization has some resistance to new technology. So what did you do?
So a couple of things. One is we discussed, some of the business drivers where we saw our customers going. So our customers were becoming quite comfortable with the cloud. We saw the business drivers being more easily satisfied with cloud solutions. And so we've got executive support from the CEO and from our senior folks in the business. And then when we look at the organization, it's a transformation in the organization. We've done a lot of training. We did an immersion day, and we have to, again, when you're transforming the organization, we need paths. We need to show paths for how people get there. I was really excited, to get I get LinkedIn updates from my team, and they've gotten a certificate on their own. Like they've gone certifications. I see a lot of training requests coming through. So, we've started, we've kind of a top-down approach from a strategy standpoint, and then a bottom-up approach, with the teams. We specifically funded the work to build our landing zone. So before I started, we had ideas and we had a couple of examples, but nothing sustainable. So putting that landing zone in place is actually quite critical. We wanted to make sure it was done in a way that was secure, that was reliable. It gave me all the visibility I needed from a financial standpoint. So, and again, having that there then allowed the teams to go do other things. So there's a lot of this, what I'd say there's changes on the process. So building out infrastructure suddenly became very similar to building a software. So how do you put the software development process and methodologies into dealing with the network, the database, the operating systems? How do you build those and change? The people who are responsible for that now have to think about it a different way. And because we're in a hybrid environment, they have to think about both. How do I keep my on-prem, keep it running under its way? How do I build out into the cloud? And what are the things that make sense to bring together and do them one way? And what are the things they're just easy to keep, separate? The second was what I said, design changes. So suddenly these kind of really cool ideas about parallelization can be achieved. This is reality. So, I've been dabbling and financial services have been dabbling in parallel processing for many years. I had a project a number of years ago where we were trying to recoup compute on the desktop for people who are using their desktops, and we would push risk analytics to those desktops and pull them back to avoid buying equipment. Now that's real. Like now you can containerize, it leads to APIs. These are all things you can now do. So you have to rethink your problem, because now you can suddenly take the problem that took 10 compute hours and, okay, well, we could buy 10 machines so it could be done in an hour. What if I have 10,000 machines? Now I can solve problems much, much faster, but I have to redesign the way I do things. And then the final thing is what I said, we went from, the PowerPoint design debate, which is the best way to do it, which is the best architecture, which is the best platform, to an engineering approach. Make a proposal, test it. You're taking an experimental approach. So less debate, more experiment, less supposition, more data, and we use the data then to tune our systems. And changing the way that people approach their problems, the way they think about it, that's where I see the transformation happening in the organization, because we can't get there without the people. I have this incredibly talented group of engineers, software development, and infrastructure and operations on my team. How do we give them the training, give them the insight to look at the problem in a different way, and then start to apply this new technology to it?
So Peter Millbrook and Peter Williams, what is your perspective on managing the processes and best practices and managing the people within the organization when you're doing a transformation like Minor just described?
I think Minor did a great job of describing some of the evolution that an organization has to go through. It breaks into two things. How do people change and change their conception of their roles? And how do processes change? Or how does the organization approach the technology? What we've seen to be very successful is an iterative process amongst our customers, where the amount of planning, the whiteboarding, the PowerPointing, et cetera, is just enough, just sufficient to get everyone on the same page, and then moving in. And this is, of course, after all the foundational work, the landing zones, the security is put in place, because that is not work you skimp on. But once that's in place, moving into a small incremental change, hypothesis experiment, but you can do the same thing with transformation and development, where you put out a pilot or a POC very quickly to learn from it, throw it away. You do enablement very quickly so that you have the steps necessary to move on to an actual deployment of an application. And that application iterates and iterates and iterates because the cost to making a change is very low. So that means the benefit of rapid changes and ratio of benefit to cost is very high. The most important thing one learns in one's career, the older one gets, is problems ultimately always turn out to be people. So how do you keep people on board all the time? The cloud, the new things have to be part of their job. And it's not at weekends or nights or I got my cert last Saturday. It's got to be part of my job requires me to have this because I can't function without this knowledge and without this technology. I don't know. What do you think, Peter?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a matter of people, and the biggest challenge with cloud transformation is actually organizational. It's not technical. Although the technology is different and newer ways of doing things, are available. The biggest challenge that we see in organizations moving to the cloud is reorganizing their teams to take advantage of cloud capabilities and really the agility that goes with it. One of our customers has been very innovative in the cloud, has developed some exciting capabilities around wealth management, had tested it, excited about it, went to move it to production and support it in production, and realized that their model for supporting applications was going to need to be different, and their organization really had to pivot pretty quickly because they were accustomed to turning it over to another team to manage, and that other team was less familiar with how to operate in the cloud. And frankly, that group that built this wealth management capability was interested in controlling their own destiny and being able to take DevOps approaches that would allow them to operate and deploy new changes at will, all within the security policies and guardrails that their organization had established, which of course, using services you can automatically check and guarantee that you're consistent with those if your organization has set those policies up such that nothing can actually be deployed without being consistent with those policies. And yet their organization wasn't prepared to support that model. They were accustomed to when something goes to production, we hand it over to a different team and they manage it. And if it's down, they'll troubleshoot it and they'll deal with it. And so it's the transformation of the way teams work together and kind of roles and responsibilities that is perhaps the hardest thing to learn as organizations really achieve the agility that's possible with the cloud. So it's exciting all around, and it creates new opportunities for everyone involved. We find that the more people understand about how they can do their job better and innovate faster using some of the automation of these services, the more excited they get about it. but it does present a lot of challenges, and it's a huge learning curve. And I think that's, Peter, to your point before, I think that's what we've seen organizations like Risk Focus really help customers with, because it does take that sort of sometimes an outsider perspective coming into organizations saying, hey, here's what we've seen be successful.
So last question before we go to break, we talked about scalability, agility, security, and there's an excellent question from Girish Maraliga. Thank you so much, Girish. And the question is, what about resiliency? So you used to have a bunch of servers, and now you have infinitely more servers. So they all fail at some point or another. So who wants to take? Peter, I think this Peter Williams. I think this is for you, maybe for Miner as well.
The ability to seamlessly fail over, not just to a different data center, but in many cases, the companies want to have a multi-region approach to how they can fail over. So they're replicating data across, from a London region to Tokyo region, and vice versa, and being able to sustain widespread outages to support significant failover requirements, in many cases replicating in an automated fashion. This is a huge benefit. The other, I think, consideration comes in when it comes to kind of the cost. Traditionally, organizations have had to set up and pay for servers they're not using in a failover scenario. And a lot of times our customers are finding that they can set up failover scenarios where they're not paying anything or barely anything for kind of a pilot light scenario where they in a failover they actually spin up a lot of the capabilities required that are no longer available in a primary region. It's absolutely a major benefit, and it's an exciting part of how our financial services organizations can take advantage of the cloud to meet their resiliency needs. Some of the innovation in terms of hardware that our customers have asked for, whether it's around FPGA or quantum computing. I don't know if you guys have seen some of the latest innovation that customers are getting ready for our world where quantum computing is really viable, and starting to really test on really the bleeding edge, if you will, of capabilities. That is where we see a focus. Is we try to be ahead of any innovation on the hardware side and make that available as soon as possible to our customers, so they can go in and spin up some servers and test with them. From a latency perspective, we certainly have invested significantly in low latency capabilities, and we're starting. But today something like ultra low latency electronic trading does not exist in the cloud, right? That's not something that is out there yet. But we are seeing exchanges, publicly stating that they're making significant investments in the cloud to support the activities that those exchanges need to do on cloud. And then within the cloud, we've certainly taken a lot of investments to make sure that we can make data available in a super, extremely fast way within availability zones. Now, region to region, of course, you have just speed of light concerns that are going to restrict you, but within the confines of a particular availability zone, we endeavor to make it as latency free as possible, and even have some innovations that enable you to kind of isolate servers so that they're within, effectively think of it as in the same rack, even though it may not be strictly speaking that.
Sure, and again, I think I indicated before, we still see this as a hybrid model. So things that are, need to be, no matter what I do in AWS, I still got to ship that information from wherever region it's in. So it could be Northern Virginia or Ohio to a market center, and that'll take longer than if I compute it locally. So we still see a lot of customers who want to be co-located at exchanges. that are going to look at cross connects. They're going to worry about the latency through a particular switch. For a lot of other problems, once the trade's been executed, once the market data has been consumed and we've made a trading decision, that's really where you start to see the advantage of using using a cloud. And it's really not a latency play; it's a throughput play. Like, how quickly can I process all of this data? How quickly can I process all of the market data and make a decision about something that might have a signal of a minute or 30 seconds? And that's where the shipments between different data centers kind of goes away. But yeah, it's a hybrid model. I see it's hybrid for the foreseeable future. The exchanges made big investments in their data centers. Anyone's been up to Mahwah, New Jersey, knows there's a large data center sitting out there, and that took a lot of money, and people paid for that. So I don't think that one's moving anytime soon, but I could be wrong.
Not just throughput play, but also a reliability play. Like, you don't ever want to lose your key database, your key pipeline. So you can be very, very good at building hardware and building networks, but ultimately you're inventing an awful lot of technology that's probably been done by someone else better in some way. And you certainly have a much better toolkit based on the public cloud than you would hand-rolled. Or I should say, at least you got a lot of hand-rolling to do to achieve the same level of kit. So I think reliability is essential in this play as well.